Okay, I'm going to take you through how to drape the notched collar lapel jacket. Draping is different than pattern making in that we're working on the form in the 3 dimensions rather than creating shapes on the table flat and then putting them on the form. So draping is a really great way to understand fit and alterations and connect it to pattern making. So this lesson is important if you want to try and have a more holistic understanding of the form and pattern making in general. I think for me, draping helps me understand the pattern making alterations and changes and what happens when you do something on the table and bring it up here. So like I said, I think it makes for a nice marriage. The first thing we have to do is prepare our fabric. So we're going to be placing flat pieces of fabric onto the form. And so before you cut your fabric, you also want to prepare your form. So you need to put in a bust line level and a hip level, as well as a shoulder level. So the shoulder level should be about 3 inches down from the neckline. The hip level is 7 inches down. This is going to be subsequently where I end my jacket. That's also where you can put yours differently. There's a high hip and a low hip. High hip is 7 inches down, low hip is 9 inches down. And the bust level, we want to make sure is just absolutely perpendicular to the floor. And to center front. And same thing with the shoulder level, make sure it is 90-degree angle to center front. This is like eyeballing, but you can, you'll get good at this over time, being able to see that stuff. So once you have that marked on your form, and you can do it in tape or bias tape with pins. I don't have any sticky tape, the little marking tape right now, but that's easier because you don't have the pins in the way. But at the same time, sometimes it can come off and stuff. So, all right, so we've marked our levels. And the reason we're doing that is because when we're draping, we have to make sure that the fabric is staying on the grain, just like we're really cognizant of the grain when we do pattern making. We want to make sure that we're also very cognizant of the grain when we're draping. And in order to get an accurate pattern, we have to make sure that those grains and balance lines are all aligning so that everything hangs right when it actually goes onto the body once it's made. So the first thing we're going to do, I have a little a little document. Sorry, I'm going to do it like this. That has some directions on where to measure. So I'm going to be doing the demonstration. But you can also refer to the document, which is also provided for you in a folder along with this video. So the first thing we're going to do is measure the back. So we want to measure along the shoulder line. So measure along the shoulder line. I get 7 inches. And then we have to do a little bit of math. And so the 7 inches plus 4 inches. So I have 11 inches total. So I'm going to be making my piece of fabric 11 inches wide. And so you can actually mark that. Now we want to cut our fabric on the grain. So the grain line should be running up and down like this. You can, I wouldn't use the selvage as part of this unless, and if you do, just make sure it's on the side that you're not really measuring from. We want to kind of use whatever straight line we have. Now, when you're preparing your fabric, it's pretty important to cut and tear rather than try and cut straight lines. And the reason we do that is because when you tear, it's tearing on one single, weft. And so you want warp or weft. And so you want to make sure that actually creates a nice 90-degree angle once the fabric is actually prepared and stretched out. So you can kind of make sure that you're using the correct grain by doing that instead of trying to cut straight lines. And so then we're going to also measure the length. So we're going to measure from the top of the neck plate for center back length as well as center front. And for this, we're going all the way to the length of your garment. So again, if you want it to end on the hip line as I have it, that works. But if you want to create a longer jacket or shorter, you can always make a customary measurement, and you want to mark that. And when you are marking that on your form, make sure that you're also marking 7 inches from waistline at different points, and you can kind of correspond in that way. Your line will be accurate. So I have 27 inches, and again, I'm going to add 4, so that gives me 31. So I'm going to cut a piece of fabric. Let's see if I can just. That is 11 inches wide and 30 inches long. And again, that 30 inches is going to be along the selvage line. Your length on the front is probably going to be the same. So you can kind of cut across the width usually of the fabric, and that usually works fine. So like I said, I have 31. And if you go more, that's totally fine. It's just that you can't go any less. So I usually kind of give a little extra. And then again, like I said, if you want to tear across. And for this, I just tore across the whole length because I'm going to create front and back out of the same piece. Sometimes I actually do like to go from the selvages. And like I said, you leave that just not on the center back or center front, you leave it on the side that will be cut off eventually, and then it's fine. So for the back piece, like I said, I'm going to measure 11 inches. And I think for here, like I said, I think I might even go an extra inch. Snip and tear. And you want to take a look at your rectangle and make sure that it looks relatively straight. If anything looks warped, you can sort of pull and adjust this on the bias. You can also steam it into shape if it really is off. But for the most part, it should be, relatively rectangular. Look for 90-degree angles. And like I said, you can always kind of pull on the bias and then press that out for nice flat piece. So I'm also going to measure my front, and so get those measurements. So where I want to measure for this is going to be on the bust line from the side seam to center front, and then I'm going to add 9 inches. So measuring from center front all the way to the side seam, I have 10. So that's going to be 10 plus 9 is 19 inches. I might just kind of round up to 20 for that one. And then the length, as I said, is same. You want to do from the neck plate. And this is only for the jacket. You don't always go from the neck plate unless your instructions mention it. And so this is about the same. And so again, it's 26 in the front because we have a little bit less curvature, where in the back it was, curving here and curving here. It's 27, so that those curves add an inch. But like I said, because I split it the whole way across, the back is longer, so that's fine. So I'm going to do 27 plus 4 again, and that is 31. So turn it over here. So again, this time I'm going to measure from the selvage again inside, and this time, as I mentioned, I'm going to go 20 inches and then snip and tear. And again, that's adding that extra inch on, so I know that that's going to be wide enough. And set the scrap from the middle aside. We're going to use that for the collar drape piece in a few minutes. Just kind of set it aside. We will return to that. Right now, I want to show some markings that we're going to put onto the fabric. And that, again, will help us align the marks on the form that we've created and the grain of the fabric. So I'll share this image with you. So it's this one. So for the back, we're going to put that aside for a minute. And so we're going to work with the front first, mark up the front first, and then we'll revisit the back. With draping, we have to make sure that everything is lining up. We don't use measurements so much as points, right? So if we're not using measurements as much, we have to make sure that those points are aligning between our patterns. And so we have to be careful and make sure that everything is marked on the fabric. So I'm going to kind of tilt this down what we're going to mark, and like I said, I'm going to put the selvage on this side of the fabric, on the left side. So put your selvage on the left side, and we're going to mark 1 inch. And again, pressing your fabric is a really great idea as well. Going to skip that right now, but we should be okay. All right, so on the right side of your fabric now, against that raw edge of the torn edge, we're going to measure 5 inches in, and then we're going to mark 2 lines. One will actually be 4 inches in, and one will be that 5-inch mark. So I will take this off of share so you can kind of see my paper, or my fabric. So for a 5-inch mark, I'm going to just kind of come in, mark a couple of lines, a little dashes, and then I'll connect those lines. And when you're measuring, I usually measure from when the fibers actually start to be woven together. I try not to go to the edge where the fibers are kind of loose and raw. So, use where the fabric actually starts. And we're going to extend this line from top to bottom on our paper. And then we're going to draw another line 1 inch from that towards the right. So you're going to, like I said, have 2 lines, one drawn at 4 inches and one drawn at 5 inches. And again, extend these all the way to the top. Okay. It's pretty hard to see. Let's see. But the diagram will help with that. So again, share my screen, and you can see what we need to do is then put a little mark for our center front neckline. And what we're going to do is we're going to make that center front cross mark line 4 inches down, because we measured 4 inches. The neck plate is about 4 inches, and so it's a little bit more, but that's about what we're going to be using. So 4 inches down from the top of the fabric, so right from here, and we're going to do that on that 5-inch line, so the line that's more inside the fabric. And so that's 4 inches. And this one is your center front. And when we're doing draping, it's really important to mark things as well. So this is actually our extension line, and you can mark that as well. And so when we're doing a jacket, we need an extension for the closure, so that when the front overlaps, that the buttons or closure can be right on center front. So we have our center front neckline right here. So this, again, you can mark center front neckline. And then we're going to find our bust line. And so the way that we have to do that is go back to our form. And this is what happens a lot with draping, is we're kind of looking and measuring and figuring out where points are. So then again, when we put this on the form itself, we can orient everything around that. So I'm going to measure from the neckline, since we just figured out where that was, to the bust line. And so I have about 7 1/4. And so I'm going to mark that down on the fabric from the neckline. Oops, 7 1/4. Okay, and then we're going to square out from that. So you can either use an L square, or you can use your grid ruler, but you do want to make sure that it is square. And you can extend that the whole way. across the fabric. So we should have on our front piece, center front, an extension line, center front neckline, and a bust line. So next, we're going to mark a couple other things onto this. So the next things we need to mark are side seam, the center of the princess panel, and the apex, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is find the apex. So back to the form over here. We know we have our bust line, right? So if we know we have our bust line in our center front and we've marked all of these points, what we can do is use that grid to find that next measurement. So we're going to measure along the bust line from center front to the apex, which should be the cross mark of the bust line and the princess line. So I have 4 inches exactly. So on my fabric, for the apex, I'm just going to cross mark. So I'm going to measure 4 inches on that bust line. And again, you can write bust line here. That might help identify things. So 4 inches from that center front is my apex. And again, I will definitely mark that apex. The next thing I want to find is, going back to my form, is the side seam. And so we can go from the apex to the side seam and get that measurement. So right along that line. So I have about 6 inches. So again, go back to my table and I'm going to measure 6 inches from there and cross mark that. And for that one, we're going to actually square down and draw a line for our side seam. And that can go the length of the fabric. Right. So the next thing that we need to find is the center of the princess panel. And so this one we're actually also going to draw straight down. And so again, this one is this is splitting the difference. So if this was 6 inches, we're going to find the center of that. That's 3 inches. So in between that, we have 3 inches. And so we'll square down from that. So again, here we will write side seam. And actually on the drawing, we didn't square down all the way for that. Sometimes I do that. Fine if you want to draw some lines. The princess line, center of the princess line is a plumb line. So that's for us to make sure that things are on the grain for that particular point. And the side seam is a good one to reference as well. And so same thing, we're going all the way down. All right. So you should have your front panel piece should look like that. You should have all of that marked on your fabric. And so I'm just marking center of princess panel. All right, so now we can prepare the collar. So you want to set aside your front piece. We will come back to this. And so now we're going to prepare the collar piece, which is, as we said, we set aside the middle piece before. And so the size of the collar piece is going to be 12 inches by 8 inches. So we want it to be 8 inches tall. And so I'm going to my fabric. I'll just in the window there. Similarly, you can sort of go bigger, but this is a nice one to kind of stick to the measurements as well. They're pretty exact. If you need bigger collars, and again, if it's a little bigger, it's okay. And then this is the 12 inches wide. So here is my other. So I, again, tear and tear. So we have a little square here. And so now we're going to transfer those marks that are shown in the diagram. So I'm going to stop the share, but we're going to draw a cross grain 2 inches up from the bottom, and then we're going to fold over one side about 1 inch. So 2 inches from the bottom on the long side here, going to draw a nice line. And again, this is a line that's going to keep us on track. And then on the left-hand side, we're going to fold it over 1 inch, and you can mark this. And so this is going to be our center back, okay? And so you want to fold that over on that line. You can press it, score it with your finger. Just want that line to be creased. Okay, and that's basically all we have to do to prepare the collar. So you can set that one aside with your front piece. And next, we're going to prepare the back piece. So the back piece is going to be like this. So we want to prepare our fabric. So here again, we have our piece, our back piece. And we're going to put, I like to put the selvage on the right, because that's going to be the side that we don't end up using as much. And we're going to fold over that center back again. I like to do 1 inch, that helps. So I'll just bring you back here to stop sharing. So first we're going to mark 1 inch from that raw edge. Very important to use rulers and, make sure everything is straight on this. It's, equally important, of course, when you're doing flat pattern making. So similar, but you want to take the same amount of care that you do, at least in preparing things and when you're transferring things later, which we'll get to at the end of this demonstration. So again, kind of creasing, you can take this to the iron, which I may do. And again, this is our center back. So I mark that. Next, we want to find our measurements for our center back piece. So again, sharing that screen, you can see this diagram. So we're going to put in the center back neckline. So we'll measure that down from the neck band, again, where we started our measurement of the for the fabric. Then we're going to measure from the neckline to the shoulder blade level, since we have both of those points. And then we'll measure from the shoulder blade level to the hip line or the end of the fabric where we're going to end our design. And so then we will do a put in our side seam basically. And so we'll go over to the side seam here. I will demonstrate these things now. So first we're going to measure from the neckband, as I said, down to the neckline, which I have 3.5 inches. I'm working on a very old size 11, but so your measurements might be a little different. So again, measuring 3.5 inches down cross marking that. And that's our neckline, center back neckline. And then again, we're going to measure our shoulder blade level. So from the neckline to the shoulder blade level, it's 4 inches. And for that, we're going to square out from the center back. Okay, so now we have our shoulder blade level, so you can put shoulder line. Then we want to find our hip level. So again, onto the form, going to measure from that shoulder blade level that we just found down to the end of the garment or my hip line. Now, you can measure straight if you want your fit to be a little bit more straight. You might want to give a little bit of ease in there, or if it's going to be a little bit fitted. So some of that does kind of matter, but you know, you don't want to, you just kind of want to adhere to what you are designing and think about that. So I have 19 1/4. So from that shoulder blade level, going to measure down 19 1/4 and cross mark that. And then you want to square out from there. And mark that hip line. And then we're going to go back to the form and we're going to measure on the hip line from center back to the side seam. And for that, I have 9 1/4. And so now we want to make that mark, but if you refer back to the diagram, we also want to add a 1/2 inch ease for this. So we're going to take that 9 1/4, add a 1/2 inch, and then we'll do 9 3/4 from the center back. So I'm going to measure 9 3/4 from the center back. Cross mark that, and then we want to square up for that as well. Square for everything. All right, so now we have prepared our back. We're actually going to start draping on the back. So now that we've prepared our fabric, I'm going to start a new video. You've prepared your fabric, we're ready to drape.